What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the 5th episode in Season 3 of the Paramount hit TV show, Mayor of Kingstown. And just so you guys know, this video will contain spoilers, so if you haven't gotten around to watching the episode yet and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. So this episode begins with Kyle dressed in his SWAT tactical gear, about to breach a location with other SWAT members. Now, after the group is inside and the shooting starts, we realize that they're being shot at with paint pellets when the man standing behind Kyle is hit. Kyle responds by shooting the assailant right between the eyes, and then the lights come on and the group exit a training set. Now, outside the set, Kyle sees Big Rob, who congratulates him on a job well done and asks him how he feels. And Kyle simply responds, "Good. Really effing good." Roll opening credits. Now, this scene was a good starting point because for about 20 seconds, I really thought that Kyle was already on SWAT and they were breaching a real location with Big Rob and the boys. But it was a fake out, a head slapper, if you will. And it was a good one. You know, not a bad way to start an episode. Anyway, after the opening credits, we get Mike and Evelyn at her place being all domestic. Mike is standing at a bedroom window drinking coffee in a wife-beater t-shirt while we watch Evelyn on the phone with someone giving her some really bad news. And after she hangs up, she tells Mike that there were more ODs on tainted drugs. Now, Mike tells Evelyn that Bunny's going to fix that problem. She then tells Mike that she doesn't think Bunny is the problem. She tells him that the medical examiner got the drug analysis back and that the drugs contain meth and opioid analogs from Russia. So there we have it. It's not the Aryans tainting the drugs, it's the Russians. I knew it was one or the other, so there's the answer to the second big question I had, with the first being who was setting off the bombs. And it turns out that was the Russians too, in case you were wondering and you haven't watched any of my previous videos on this season. So it would appear that my man Constantine has been a very busy guy. Anyway, after Mike hears the news, he asks Evelyn if she can sit on the information. She tells him that it's already too late and that everyone knows by now. Evelyn goes on to tell Mike that she can't risk more bodies dropping on the streets because people don't know what they're taking. And this is where Mike promises to fix it. But the way he does it is unlike anything I've seen him do before. He says it to Evelyn like a husband would say to his wife. And Evelyn looks at him while he's saying it like she believes it with all of her heart. Mike then tells Evelyn that she looks beautiful and the pair kiss again. Like a married couple, though. So I guess the writers are officially all in on Mevelyn. And I want you to take a moment to appreciate the irony of a district attorney openly dating a convicted felon, one who actually served time in prison. That's wild as hell for real. And I mean, they look so domestic in this scene. Like they're definitely making love butt naked in bedrooms these days instead of banging it out fully clothed in the bathrooms like they used to. Yeah, Mike got a girlfriend. Good for him, for now. I just wonder how long it'll last, 'cause this is Kingstown after all. So next, we see Ian and Stevie at the station talking about the DOC releasing a nonviolent offender from prison, who apparently caved in a shop owner's head with a brick for $15 so he could score some fentanyl. Then he OD'd on the fentanyl, survived, and now the taxpayers can pay his medical bills before he's thrown right back in prison, where the taxpayers will pay for him to be there. They call it the circle of shit. And, you know, this scene was just a quick lesson in the politics of prisons, plain and simple. And I myself have some thoughts on the prison industrial complex as a whole, but that's not what you guys are here for, so I'll just keep my thoughts about that to myself here. Anyway, Kyle and Big Rob show up, and Kyle tells the guys that he made SWAT. And as they congratulate him, as if there was any doubt. But Captain Walter appears, demanding to see Ian in his office. And when Ian asks what for, the captain responds, "Just be there." Stevie notes that the request sounds extremely official. The guys ask Ian what he did, and Ian responds, "Nothing." Next, we see Mike on the road. He calls Bunny, several times in fact, with no answer. Then we see Bunny on the other end of his call, standing on the dilapidated docks. It looks like the docks where Milo was killed, choosing not to answer said call. And he says out loud to himself, "It's too little too late, Mikey Mike." So we know here that Bunny knows what Mike knows, and that he plans to do something about it. In the next scene, we see exactly what that something is. He and his crew examine heavy-duty weapons as if they're about to go to war. Bunny likes the grenades, but his cousin, who's showing the weapons, convinces him to go with heavy-duty guns instead, stating that the grenades are just too dangerous and will cause too many civilian casualties. Now next, we see Mike, still driving, and he calls Ian to get a 20 on Bunny. Ian asks if Bunny went underground, and Mike says he just needs to talk to him. Ian tells Mike that the Russians were the ones who messed with his drugs. Mike tells Ian that he knows, and that's why he needs to talk to him. Ian tells Mike he'll get on it, and then he tells Mike that Kyle made squat. And Mike doesn't seem to be too happy about the news. Probably because he feels like, Kyle's going to get himself shot. Next, we see Tracy driving through town. And, I've been wondering when we would see her again, but she ends up at the women's prison. When she enters, Lena, a fellow nurse, says to her, "Welcome back to the Coliseum," and throws her a lab coat. And, Tracy responds, "It's good to be back." So I think this is the first time we've actually seen Tracy doing what she does for a living. Now, I might be wrong on that note, but off the top of my head, I can't remember any seeing Tracy at work before now. I think we have seen her in scrubs before now, but just not at work actually doing what she does. So, again, like I said, she's a registered nurse who works specifically in the prison system. And that lines up perfectly with the idea first laid out by Mike in the pilot episode of the series that everyone in Kingstown is either incarcerated or working for, with, or against those who are incarcerated or who have been incarcerated. Hence this balance that Mike is always going on about. Anyway, next we see Iris walk into Cavo, Milo's club, which is now Constantine's club. And maybe it always was Constantine's club. I believe Constantine said he gave the club to Milo, but, nevertheless, she talks briefly with Roman, Constantine's watchdog. And here we find out that he knows her and that she knows him. She asks if Constantine is in, and Roman asks if he knows she's in town, and she replies, "No one does." Now, this is interesting, not because Iris knows Constantine. We already knew that they at least knew of each other. What's interesting here is that Constantine didn't know that Iris was in town, and maybe that's why she didn't want to be fingerprinted a few episodes back. I guess that little mystery was much simpler than I thought, and that the issue was right in front of our faces the whole second half of episode 3.3. Now, I still don't quite understand what Iris meant by she's not Constantine's type, unless Constantine is gay. And if that is the case, then I guess I was just looking in the wrong direction on that note in the previous video when, I stated that Iris might be trans. And that maybe that's what she meant by she wasn't his type. But I will admit to you guys that after I made that video, I did wonder if the showrunners could even get away with casting a female to play a trans character without there being a huge backlash that we would have certainly heard something about by now. So there's that. But I did state in the video that I could be wrong, that it was a leap. It happens sometimes. But Constantine being gay might explain why we never see him taking part in those wild sex parties on his boat. He's always just kind of sitting there minding his own as everybody else is indulging. Anyway, I guess we'll soon find out exactly what's what on that front. Now, in the next scene, we stay at the club and we see Constantine talking to himself while he does lines of cocaine. Lots and lots of lines of cocaine. He says that he gave Milo this place, meaning the club, and that he hijacked an armored vehicle, which he seemingly had no problem with, and that he killed 2 guards, which again, Constantine seemingly had no problem with. What it appears really pissed him off was that after he did all that he surrendered. In his words, like a serf for stealing a fucking goat. And Constantine claims that in surrender, there is shame, and that shame leads to betrayal. So here, we not only see what Constantine's problem was with Milo, but we also learn that Constantine is higher up on the food chain than Milo was as well, and that Milo did something that Constantine sees as betrayal. And that's all useful information as this story continues to play itself out. I'll be interested to find out exactly what Milo did that Constantine saw as betrayal enough to do away with him. And if I had to make a guess right now, my guess is that he snitched in some way, shape, or form. But I guess we'll see. Next, we see Mike roll up to the cell phone shop, aka Bunny's old rooftop. And he asks Bunny's guys who are standing outside where he is. And they don't have an answer for him. But they do tell him that Rhonda is in the hair shop next door and that she might have more to tell him, wink, wink. So he walks next door to check. And when Rhonda sees Mike knocking, already knowing what she wants, she tells him that she can't help him. But she eventually does let him in before telling him essentially that he looks like crap. But she also looks happy to see him. Go figure. Now, he asks about business, and she tells him that it's going well. She tells Mike that she hasn't seen Bunny. He implies that Bunny hasn't been over there much and that she might be a bit exposed. He asks about the soldiers outside, and she tells him that that's business, not protection, and that Bunny has to look out for himself so that he can look out for everyone who depends on him. Mike thinks about what Rhonda says, then he tells her that he's glad she's doing good. He then tells her that, if she hears from Bunny, to tell him that he's looking for him, before he remarks that it's good to see her. And then on his way out, he tells Bunny's guys to also let him know that Mike's looking for him. And, at this point, I'm not quite sure why the writers chose to do this whole Rhonda has a crush on Mike thing. Because we've been waiting for 10 episodes now across 2 seasons for that to pay off in some way. Because I believe that Rhonda showed up for the first time in episode 5 of season 2. And this is her 4th appearance in the show. And, I just felt like this scene was unnecessary because all she really ever does is humanize Bunny, pontificating on what he does and why it's necessary to do what he does for the people that he does it for. Outside of that, I hate to say it, but maybe Rhonda as a character is unnecessary, or at least she has been to this point, because unless the writers plan for Mike and Rhonda to hook up at some point, or for Rhonda to come between he and Bunny somehow, I don't know why she's even the character that we need to focus on. Though I will hold out final judgment because I do think that before this story is done, Bunny and Mike will have a you or me moment, and that'll definitely be interesting for sure. But judging by this scene alone, I honestly would have rather seen Rebecca this episode instead of Rhonda, because as Mike's assistant, she's directly involved in the telling of this story. If for no other reason than she just knows everything that's going on. And, she ain't been getting no love lately, if you ask me. I'm starting to kind of miss her a little bit. Anyway, next we see Iris and Constantine sitting at the bar, and they're talking. Now, Constantine remarks that Iris has aged well, so apparently he hasn't seen her in some time. Now, Iris responds telling him she feels old as fuck. The pair hug, and Constantine tells Iris that it's good to see her. Iris responds telling Connie, she calls him Connie, that she missed him, and the pair go to have a drink. Now, from there, we see Tracy working with Sally, an inmate and a patient who's trying to get her to prescribe 20 milligrams of something, I'm not sure what. She tells Tracy that getting her medicine wasn't a problem while she was gone, but Tracy tells her that what she is doing is textbook drug-seeking behavior, and she threatens to have her sent to the SHU for wasting her time. Now, at that point, Sally gets real buck. And Tracy is forced to retreat to the safety of a nearby office as the guards deal with the situation. But as all this is happening, we see Cherry. You might remember Cherry. And she's the female inmate that stabbed Sam to death after he banged her out in the hallway when she claimed to have a stomach ache, and he, finished inside her. And guess what, class? She's got a full-on baby bump. So I'm guessing that's Sam's kid she's carrying. And, inside the office, after the commotion is dealt with, C.O. Breen, one of the guards, comes into the office and tells Tracy a joke to try to lighten the mood. And then Lena, the other nurse, walks in and claims she's been trying to get his attention for a while, which I'm not sure has anything to do with anything. But then Tracy, who happens to be looking through a patient file, asks Lena about Cherry and inquires as to how she could be pregnant given that she's been incarcerated at this point for 3 years and they don't do conjugals. But Lena basically tells her that Cherry will likely never reveal the identity of her baby's father. But we kind of have information on who that could be, unless something else has happened off camera that we just don't know about. So now we know why Natasha Mark was brought back by the showrunners. I did hear something about her coming back this season, but she shows up for the first time in episode 5. But I'm interested to see how Cherry will be involved in the story going forward, seeing as how Sam is dead. And I mean, I guess we'll find out. Maybe the Crips will have her, do something, else, or maybe, because like I said, I'm also wondering what role C.O. Breen will have to play in all of this. And I heard about Matthew Del Negro's casting months ago. It was actually made a pretty big deal, so I figured he must be recurring. Therefore, I expected his character will have something to say in all of this by the time the season is done. I'll just add him to the growing list of minor characters that have popped up this season with no discernible explanations as of yet. Unless, stuff is about to break off, to pop off in the males' prison, because it already kind of has between the Aryans and the Crips, or the All Blacks now, as they call themselves these days. But I wonder if Cherry might be asked to take out C.O. Breen because maybe he works with the Aryans. Again, that's just off the top of my head, just spinning right now. So don't hold me to that. But again, like I said, if Cherry, if Natasha Mark was brought back, she was brought back for a reason. I'm sure she's recurring, and and so is Matthew Del Negro. He's got to be recurring because again, like I said, the story, was a big story online that they were casting him. So if I had to guess, those two are kind of going to be joined, in this story somehow. Because even as the commotion was going on, Cherry was looking at, C.O. Breen, either like she wanted to do him because I guess he's attractive, or she wanted to do him as in maybe, he's one of the corrections officers that's working with the Aryans. And so that's going to be, something that comes to a head, as we move further down the line. But, again, that's just a good guess right now. We'll see if it comes to pass. Anyway, from there, we find Iris and Constantine at the club chatting over drinks. Iris tells him that she came back to town because she heard that he was there and that Milo was gone. Sure. Constantine tells Iris that Milo wasted her like he wasted the club he gave him. So like I said, it turns out that Constantine did give Milo the club. He asks why she ever came to Kingstown, and she tells him that Milo called for her and that no one stopped it. Constantine tells her that he would have stopped it had he known. She then tells Constantine that coming to Kingstown wasn't good for her. He tells her that Milo wasn't good for her either. He goes on to ask her why she didn't go back to New York, and Iris says that Milo has people in New York. Constantine reminds her that he is people in New York. Iris apologizes, but Constantine tells her there's no need for her to say sorry after all the gifts she's bestowed upon him. Wonder what that means. Iris remarks that they are gifts he taught her. He then tells her not to diminish her own accomplishments, as they're a testament to her fortitude. Now, Constantine goes on to tell Iris a story about his mother living in a Russian gulag under Stalin, and that one day while the prisoners was up on a mountain nearby foraging for food, that she came across a Siberian iris, and that was how she knew she would survive her ordeal. He tells Iris that the flower is meant to represent the Virgin Mary's sorrows and that her suffering is said to soften the evil hearts of men and give the world hope. He tells Iris that when she walks into a room, she pierces the souls of men and lays bare their sorrows. He tells her that it is not a gift that can be taught, that she earned it through pain, and that it's that enchanting anguish that gives her her power. And Iris just kind of chuckles as her eyes begin to water, and she asks, "And that's why you named me Iris." Now, I think that's pretty important information. Constantine apparently named Iris, so that tells me that they have a paternal sort of relationship. But you have to keep in mind that Iris probably isn't Iris's real name. In fact, Mike and Kyle have had a few conversations about that very fact over the course of the last few episodes, which means Constantine, I'm sure, isn't her biological father, and certainly not if he's gay. But he seems to be more like an adopted father figure of some kind, like maybe he rescued her from a bad situation and took her under his wing. This is also something I'd be extremely interested in finding out more about. What Iris and Constantine's relationship consists of specifically. And I'll be looking to see if the writers give us those answers before the season is done, because whatever her and Constantine's relationship has been, she clearly ain't got no problem messing him over in favor of Mike. So, unless, boy, oh boy, there's a twist to be had and maybe Iris has been messing over Mike this whole time, man, that'll be crazy. But, I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole here. We'll just kind of see what happens over the next episode or two. So next we see Ian, arrive in Captain Walter's office. And there we find out that the captain has received a lot of letters from families of cold cases in Ohio that it turns out involve Charlie. And he asks Ian how he was able to connect with Charlie. And Ian tells him that their relationship is built on respect, but that he still has to be careful because Charlie is still a serial killer. And Captain Walter, tells Ian that the letters are good publicity for the department for once, and he congratulates Ian on a job well done. And the Charlie situation is definitely one, like I said, that I think will come back and bite Ian before it's all said and done. I personally think that by the time Mayor of Kingstown ends, assuming that the show gets to an actual ending and doesn't get canceled before that, I personally think Ian's headed for prison by the time this is all done. Because remember what happened when Ian took Charlie to see Ben Morrissey back in season 2 under the guise of going to get his teeth fixed. And don't forget that Evelyn has vowed to deal with the corruption in the KPD. She even mentioned to Mike earlier in the season that she thought that Big Rob might have had Morrissey killed so that he wouldn't testify against him for what happened at the prison. And that she didn't believe for 1 second that it was a home invasion. So I think, again, Ian's downfall will always be looming as we continue on, because I definitely think that Ian will eventually be called to the carpet for what happened that day. And it may come down to the fact that he chose not to kill Charlie after everything went down. If you remember, they went out to the beach, and while Charlie was sitting there looking out at the water, Ian pulled a gun on him, and, he eventually decided not to pull the trigger. So I think that the breadcrumbs will lead Evelyn to Charlie, and Charlie, because he's a little slow, may end up spilling on Ian, even if he doesn't mean to. And then Mike will have to stand between his bestie and wifey, and that could get hectic. So next we see Mike finally arrive at Cavo, and, I was waiting to see what he would do when he found Iris there. But he plays it cool and basically tells Constantine that he has to stop messing with Bunny's drugs. And just then, like clockwork, Bunny's guys show up in an unmarked van. They enter the club with their big old guns, and they go blucka, blucka, blucka all over the place, doing away with several people as Mike tackles Iris and hides her behind the bar. Barely, missing getting shot up himself. Now, of course, KPD shows up, and Ian is pissed. He wants to go pick up Bunny immediately, citing that Mike could have died and that he knew Bunny had more guns than the ones he gave back to the cops a few episodes back in a neighborhood that Ian calls Crackerville, I think he said. But Mike tells Ian that Bunny wasn't aiming at him and that Ian needs to go around and get statements from everybody, and that he can't do it out on the street because, Bunny's guys might come back. He also tells Ian to take Iris in. Now, Ian asks Mike what Iris is even doing there, and Mike tells him that he doesn't know. And at that point, he goes over to Constantine, who's leaning against the hood of his car, by the way, with a drink in his hand, just cooling. And he asks him not to hit Bunny back, stating that he's already established his territory, made his presence known, and gotten his market share, and that an eye for an eye just leaves everybody blind. He tells Mike that, Constantine tells Mike that when he acts, he does so with a purpose, and that Bunny, the men that Bunny killed were just discounted meat marked for short sale. Wow. He goes on to tell him that he keeps his best cuts behind glass. Mike remarks that that's one way to look at people. Constantine goes on to tell Mike that the street animals showed him who they are. I didn't really appreciate that remark, but okay. Reactionary and disorganized. Now, Mike reminds Constantine that the mother effers with badges are organized and that KPD is so deep in shit that they would welcome a bullseye, and that if he F's around, that he will indeed find out. Now, in the next scene, we see Mike back at the precinct going off on Iris for putting herself in the middle of this thing with him and Constantine as Ian looks on. And when Mike asks Iris what she was thinking, she literally quotes Ian from episode 3, telling Mike that Constantine is dangerous to him. And she goes on to tell Mike that she knows him better than anyone and that he wants her to work for him at the club in front of house only. No more prostitute. She tells Mike that, if she bails now, that Constantine will get suspicious, which Ian echoes. And Mike asks if she remembers what happened to Tatiana, who had her position before. He asks if she wants to end up like her. Iris reminds Mike that he said that she could stay or she could go. She tells him that this is her staying, that this justifies her staying. Now, he reminds Iris that if anyone finds out that they're connected, that Constantine will kill her. Iris reminds Mike that everyone in the Russian mob who knows they're connected is dead. And look, this is always an omen when it comes to screenwriting, because this means that that's absolutely not the case. I mean, you know how these things go. Somebody will pop up between now and the end of the season, probably in episode 8 or 9, that will blow up Iris's spot, and then Mike will have to risk his ass yet again to save her from her cavalier choices. Anyway, we see Kyle come home to his wife and baby. He holds his son after kissing her, proudly telling him that he made SWAT. Now, Tracy tells Kyle to tell Rob, Big Rob, that if anything happens to him, if he even gets a scratch, that she will be coming for him. Kyle tells Tracy that SWAT is the safe move, which again, that's an omen. And Tracy doesn't even believe it. But she does tell Kyle that Miriam could have left Kingstown 100 times, but she didn't because she knew she was meant to serve, as are they. She tells Kyle that his mother would be proud of him. And just then, Mike enters and finally meets his nephew. He's been avoiding that all season for some reason. He and Kyle step into another room and talk about Iris and the fact that she wants to help with Constantine. And he tells Kyle that means she can't have any contact with him or Tracy. Kyle seems confused by the move. And Mike asks Kyle if he's all right. Kyle says yes. He tells Mike that he'll tell Tracy about Iris, that they basically need to act like they never met her. And then Mike tells Kyle that he heard about SWAT, excuse me. Dang, I keep saying that. He agrees that Miriam would be proud of him, which seems to reassure Kyle. Because Kyle been going through it about their mother's death, If you remember, he's, I guess he's kind of responsible for her accidentally getting shot in that shootout with Milo. So, there's that. Now, from there, we see Mike on the road again, and Bunny finally returns his call and agrees to meet him on the street. So Mike pulls over and parks, and Bunny pulls up behind him, and gets out of his car and gets in Mike's car. And Mike immediately explains to him that he cannot ghost him. He tells him that he lit up the Russians with guns that didn't come from the shop he robbed last season. And Bunny tells Mike that the Russians spiked his supply. Mike tells Bunny that he was at the club when the shooting went down and that he was almost killed. Bunny wonders why he was there, and Mike tells him he was trying to handle his issue. Bunny explains that the Russians don't know the rules in Kingstown, and Mike tells Bunny that they think they wrote the rules. And Bunny seems to think he's in the clear, though, because there's been no retaliation since the shooting. But remember, Mike told Constantine not to retaliate. But remember also that Constantine told Mike that when he makes a move, it'll serve a purpose. So we'll see what that means exactly as we continue on here. Mike tells Bunny that everything is cool for now, but that no one is resting easy. Bunny tells Mike that he heard he went to see Rhonda, and he kind of laughs about it. Mike tells Bunny that he was only there looking for him. And Bunny seems, all too happy about Mike spending time around Rhonda, almost like he wants it to be a thing. And I can't really figure out why he would want that unless Bunny is trying to put Rhonda in a position to manipulate Mike when and if the time should come. And it might be working because you can see it in Mike's face when he's around her. He cares for her. And I mean, she might even be on the list with Evelyn and Iris at this point. And maybe that's why the writers keep having her pop up. I don't know. Stay tuned, I guess. Anyway, Bunny tells Mike that he's proud of her and what she's done with the shop. Then he tells Mike that if he seeks a remedy, he needs to get KPD to stop Constantine before he gets too close to where he lives. Mike reminds Bunny to pick up his phone, and then Bunny gets out of the car. Now next we see Iris in a motel room with Mike and Ian, giving her instructions on what type of information they need on Constantine. Now, Ian tries to wire her up, but she refuses, telling them that Constantine is the one who taught her how to wear a wire, and that if he catches her wearing that, she'll end up in a dumpster. And for someone who seems really gung-ho about putting herself in mortal danger, it's pretty clear she doesn't want to die. Anyway, Ian tells her that they can't send her out there without eyes and ears on her. Well, actually, Mike tells her that. And she reminds Mike that they're not sending her anywhere, that she's making the choice to go, and that this is her going. She tells Mike to trust her. Mike gives her a burner phone for when she needs to contact him, making sure she understands not to call him from any other phone. He reminds Iris that she doesn't have to do what she's doing. Iris claims that Constantine came after Mike and she didn't do anything. And so she's doing something now. Which I have to say is kind of sweet, seeing as how Mike has risked his life several times at this point to save hers. Even when she won't do what Mike tells her to. But Mike tells her that they'll be watching, and, Ian and Mike leave the room. So next, we see Constantine and Iris arriving at his boat, dressed, for a party, with Mike and Ian sitting in a car watching at a distance. Mike tells Ian that he has a big mouth. Ian tells Mike that he wants him safe and that she wants him safe. He reminds Mike that Iris isn't actually a civilian, that she's a soldier just like they are, and that he has 1,000 people gunning for him on all sides. And he says if Iris can fix it, then he's all for it. Now on the boat, Iris and Constantine talk in a bedroom. She tells him that she was in Detroit for a while and that she did well there. Constantine reiterates how angry he is about what Milo reduced her to. He reminds Iris that she's valuable. He gets up, he pours her another drink, and he asks her to tell him all the things that Milo subjected her to. Don't really know why he wants to know, the whole spiel, but, all right. So back in the car, Ian asks Mike specifically if he remembers an old cop named McDaniel from Detroit, the motor mouth from the Motor City, he called him, with all his stories. That he talked about Detroit in the 70s and the heroin and the bodies dropping everywhere. So this must be important because I guess he's saying that what happened in Detroit is now happening in Kingstown, I suppose. Then he asked Mike how, McDaniel could walk away from all that action in favor of early retirement. And I guess this is Ian admitting that he likes the action of being a cop. If you think back to the prison riot in season 1, Ian was pretty steadfast. He was cool. It was Kyle that was losing his shit. Mike then asks Kyle if he wants to walk away from all this, and he tells Mike, F no, but I sure would like to know how we end it. Mike tells him that he doesn't know how it ends outside of an earthquake or a comet. He reminds Ian that Kingstown is built on revenge of the biblical kind, and that would be a hard habit to break. Now, back on the boat, Constantine and Iris are doing coke, all the coke. And they talk about what Iris's responsibilities will be working for him. She agrees to work at Cavo as a hostess. He asks if she wants to be the new Tatiana. She says she'll be better than Tatiana. And Constantine agrees, but he tells Iris that their stay in Kingstown will be short-lived, that the plan is to return to New York sooner rather than later, that the work they do in Kingstown will earn them their return to New York. Iris reiterates then that she missed him, and the two toast to the work they'll do together. Back in the car, Ian tells Mike that he gets the whole Iris thing. Mike appears annoyed by the notion, calling her a strawberry blonde albatross. He then asks Ian what's up with him and Rebecca. What? And see, this is why we need more Rebecca. Is she and Ian supposed to be messing? Like, I remember earlier in the season when she gave Mike a message from Ian, she called him Detective Ferguson. And when Mike told her to just call him Ian, she basically said she'd rather not. I say all this to say, why does Mike think there's something up with them? Like, what are we missing? Anyway, I guess she must be away at the moment because apparently Ian is watching her cat. That's a pretty intimate responsibility for someone you can't even refer to by their first name. But okay. Anyway, Ian chastises Mike for basically not taking what he's saying seriously. Mike then tells Ian that he wishes Iris never came to Kingstown, and now that she's working for their side, he doesn't believe she'll ever leave. Ian tells Mike he feels for Iris, that she would be someone that his mother would have taken under her wing, that's where he gets his savior complex from. And Mike tells Ian that he's no savior. Then Ian tells Mike that he misses Miriam, and, Mike just kind of nods in response. So Miriam still looms large, over this season, even though she's not there in person. Now, at that moment, a boat comes floating down the good old river. Roman steps inside the party and signals to Constantine to come out. Constantine gathers Iris, and the pair step out together. Now, Mike sees them, but he doesn't really know what it means. On the deck of the boat, Iris sees the Aryans on the boat exchanging money for the Russians' drugs. Now, she seems surprised, but she managed to play it cool, and Constantine tells Iris that unlike Milo, he keeps an eye on his business. He tells Iris that the exchange with the Aryans requires no weighing and no counting, just trust. Iris then asks if the Aryans ever cheat him. And he replies, "What would happen to people who cheat me?" And this is as much a warning, I think, as it is an answer to Iris's question. This is Connie reminding Iris that if she plays in his face, he'll kill her. Easy peasy. Now, Mike and Ian don't see any of this from the car because it happens in their blind spot. But back on the boat, Constantine tells Iris that the two of them have something in common. Something that Milo never possessed. He tells her that they know the source of their rivers, and that if you know that, you know where courage comes from. He's pontificating a lot in this particular episode, specifically to Iris. I personally think Connie needs to stop bad talking my man Littlefinger, because I've seen his work across various shows. Various. But, nevertheless. Mike and Ian watch Connie and Iris leaving the boat, and they follow them back to Iris's motel, at a distance, I assume, as to not be spotted. And inside the vehicle, Connie is still doing all of the drugs. I mean, this dude does not stop. Like, I'm surprised his nose didn't fall off this episode. But Iris, turns down the offer to do more of the drugs, stating that she needs to start heading the other way, as she puts it. Now, when Connie's car pulls up to the motel that Iris is staying in, he's disappointed with her digs, telling her that it simply won't do, and that they will have to address that in the morning. Iris kisses him, and she gets out of the car, and the vehicle drives away. Now, Mike and Ian pull up across the parking lot, and once Iris is inside and Constantine's car is clear, Mike calls her on the burner phone. And she seems pretty excited that she pulled off a caper, And then she tells Mike that she saw the Aryans and the Russians making a drug deal. Now, Mike is surprised by this, and he asks her if she's sure. He says, "You gotta be sure." And she says that she is. And, Mike tells her that she did good and that he's glad she's safe. And Iris hangs up the phone and she sits down on the bed and takes a deep breath. Again, like she's super duper proud of herself. And Mike and Ian drive away right before we cut to black. So look, this episode was a fairly focused one. It centered almost entirely on Iris, hence the episode title. We got more info on the strawberry blonde albatross, but what we learned just leads to more questions. And I suppose that's a good thing for the show because, I think as a screenwriter, that's how you maintain interest from the audience. You don't want to tip your hand too early in these types of situations. But now we're officially at the midpoint of the season, the in between episodes 5 and 6, the literal midpoint of the story. And so, or the season arc, if you will. So from here on out, I expect questions to be answered. It's clear now that the Russians are just middlemen in Kingstown. They're just there to kind of facilitate the hostile takeover of Kingstown by the Aryans, by furnishing the Aryans what they need to push the Crips out. Constantine is helping to expand territory. He's, dealing the drugs and he's tainting the Crips drugs, and basically he's preparing the Aryans to deal with pushing the Crips out. And they are the last real opposition that the Aryans have in Kingstown. Because think about it, we haven't heard anything about the Mexicans in quite some time. And the Bloods are basically were done away with and consolidated into the Crips. And like I said, in prison at least, they're the All Blacks. And so, I expect for things to really heat up in the prison as we move into the second half of this season. Also keep in mind that old Merle expects that Mike is now in his pocket specifically. Now, we know that Mike is not necessarily in Merle's pocket, regardless of how they may go way back and how Merle maybe kept him alive when he was inside. But I have a sense that an incredible ask is coming. And I believe it's going to be Merle asking Mike to do away with Bunny somehow. And I think that's coming sooner rather than later, like in the next episode or two. And I think Mike's response to that ask will put him and those around him at great risk. And it should be fun to see how Mike responds to pressure from Merle and who survives the fallout. But what do you guys think? Did you enjoy the 5th episode of the new season? Hey, look, we're halfway there. What's your favorite storyline so far? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. Also, be sure to go and check out themaskscreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write, and I'll catch y'all in the next video.